Hello and welcome to the second episode. All right, we're starting over. We're starting over.
Take it from the top.
It's an episode. It's like an app and an episode. All
Yeah.
We're going to need to put it on
Silicon Valley.
the App Store now.
Podcast is canceled. Go home. No. Second episode.
We're releasing a new app. Got microtransactions.
Yes, there's going to be. I mean, we're going to sell so many hats on this podcast. Yeah.
Awesome.
Second episode of NoCB, a grand strategy podcast where we talk mainly about the games by Paradox Development Studio, but occasionally other adjacent things. I am your host, TJ Hafer, and I am here with our wonderful panel, including Rose.
Hello.
Including Lambert.
Hello.
And including Father Loris.
Hello.
And sort of the theme of this episode, because it's actually our second episode and also our last episode of the year, end of the decade, is to sort of talk about this past decade in grand strategy. I think it's really kind of the decade that grand strategy came into its own, kind of escaped its niche.
At least on the PC side.
Right. But before that, we are going to do our Dev Diary / news segment, starting with the most recent Dev Diary for Crusader Kings 3. I'm going to wait just a second to make sure that chat can actually see what we're looking at. Okay, cool. I think we solved that issue from last week. So yeah, we got a Dev Diary about how courts, guests, and wanderers are going to work in CK3 and how you're going to have just a lot of kind of like homeless, courtless characters wandering around, just visiting different places, unless they can't find anywhere to stay, and then they'll just magically die. Just, kind of like real life.
Just disappear into nothingness. Glitterhoof finds them, and Glitterhoof is hungry.
Glitterhoof just stalking the countryside. Like... He's like every morning
beast.
Every morning you wake up and he's like a little bit closer than he was the day before, and if you can't find a castle to stay in, eventually
please let me into your court. He's coming.
You down and gores you. What stood out to you guys most about this Dev Diary? What are you excited, interested, worried about?
Stories. It's just I think that the Wanderers are going to allow for so many stories where you are watching this character move around the world, interacting with so many different courts and countries and kings, and maybe looking for fame. And I just think that the potential for stories there is honestly infinite. I'm so looking forward to it.
See, I looked at it from a gameplay perspective, and the fact that your court won't become so cluttered with 70 people and only 10 of them are important to you.
Yeah,
that's I don't know, that can be headache-inducing in later games in CK2.
Yeah,
definitely.
Oh, yeah.
I hope that also generates a bit more of an attachment, because I think these sort of stories are always the best type of stories. If you look at all fiction, all the greatest stories are Return of a King narratives, exiled kings like Aragorn or Daenerys or something, returning and reclaiming their homeland. Those are always the coolest narratives.
Oh,
so if you care a bit more about those characters, you can play into that narrative.
Oh, and especially
I think you're going to cause a
claimants
shitstorm by calling Daenerys' story the coolest.
Okay, ignore the show. Let's get into that. I'm a book man.
So am I.
the books are canon. The show, maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
We'll just leave that aside. That's for another podcast.
The
I have
show
words.
is its own
That's a
little
bullshit
world.
storm.
Yeah, the show is its own world. Let's just,
Yeah.
Yeah.
An inferior world, but it is its own world. Yeah, let's go with that.
sacrifice.
Yeah, there's all sorts of great things like that, like Henry Tudor, Merlin predicted kings coming out of Wales and reclaiming the English throne. That sort of great Return of a King narrative. It's true throughout history, and it's really it's just really engaging. So the more you can engage with that, the better.
Pushing a war for a courtier's claim as well, automatically putting them as a vassal of yours if you win it, is such a huge change.
Oh, yeah.
So much better.
No more juggling baronies around, yeah.
Well,
And then it would inevitably end up with
I did with Rhaenyra, where I was teaching him. He had one county in his capital duchy that literally was the county to give away. Give this to a claimant. Press the claimant. Okay, plot to revoke the county again. Poor Brefane. It went through like 20 different leaders over the course of the game.
It's like a guest house.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. You must meet the legal requirement of being my vassal. This is how we're gonna do it. Yeah.
you'd think after the third or fourth time, someone would go, "Wait a minute, why are you giving me this?"
Yeah. Well, it's like it's kind of along the same lines as what they've done with Imperator recently, where they reduced the number of important families in your nation, but they made them way more important, which I think has added a lot of persistent character to that game. So I'm definitely more for having fewer people to deal with, but having them matter more.
And they also color-coded them, which is awesome.
Yeah.
There is a balance to be struck with that, because what I found in Imperator is maybe 50 to 100 years into the game, you're going to find that you are running out of eligible females to marry.
Oh, yeah.
Or females that can have babies, let's say. You're always going to find the 70-year-olds, but you don't want your heir to be marrying a 70-year-old, let's be fair.
Which the AI will do on its own, just like it does in CK2. Oh, you're a 16-year-old boy. You can make babies with a 50-year-old woman, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing somebody in the comments pointed out here is that they've got the Butur and Baranes cultures, which means they've split up the kind of North African cultures that existed in CK2. So it looks like we're going to have like the same level of cultural granularity that Imperator has, where there's, like 11 different cultures for every culture group or something like that, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. I really enjoy that aspect, to be honest.
More granularity is always welcome.
Yeah. Let's see. So we talked about recruiting people to your courts. Wanderers are just going to be kind of wandering around doing their thing.
We have the guests, which are interesting because they will leave after a few years if you don't give them a reason to stay.
That is kind of cool. Yeah, because I like that it'll be kind of like the people in your court aren't going to be static, from year to year, decade to decade. That you'll have people who can kind of pop in and be part of the story for a little bit and then move on.
Yeah, I hope for like moving around is quite organic too, so like, somebody will travel north to Scotland, they'll go via London or something, hope it's interesting like that.
What I'm thinking as well is, when you're presenting a debutante and you're pulling this character out of thin air, and if you don't want them, maybe they're not very good, they literally die. Maybe now they become wanderers instead.
Yeah.
That would be
cool.
They
have something like that. Maybe with the fact there's wanderers, it might be something like you try and entice more female wanderers or male wanderers, or
maybe they'll get rid of that decision altogether.
Well, sure. That's what I think it might change to do something like maybe you hold a grand feast to try and get more diplomatic young lads and lassies to come in, or you hold a tournament which gets more wanderers and such that are of the martial persuasion.
Yeah. Or you invest in your court life, so it's all opulent and grand, so
basically you build a brothel and you have all of the wanderers.
Hey, also, I think there is like confirmed there's a dynastic trait that like improves your chance of getting wanderers.
Right. They also mentioned that children who can't inherit are likely to become wanderers. Like they say specifically, daughters in realms with male only or male preference inheritance.
Unless you marry them off somewhere
are less
before
likely
they
to
can
leave.
wander.
That's what it is.
They do also mention that if they are like a pretender, like the second son, then they are more likely to leave, though.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And they'll go find someone that wants to press their claim.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like the whole piece of, story that I want to see.
So it seems like it's going to be more important to land your non-inheriting children who are in the inheritance line, just so they don't like get up and leave.
Yeah, they're not going to be content with just being the marshal now.
Right. So that'll be interesting. A lot of this stuff is like it's hard to figure how it's going to actually play out until we get our hands on it. But They also mentioned using hooks to convince characters to become your courtiers, which will be cool if you find like a really awesome, like genius scribe or something, and then you find out his dark secrets and make him come work for you forever.
That's pretty good. That's really good.
Yeah.
You know, that random 30 marshal guy that wanders by and you're like, oh my god, I need you to be a knight for me to fight in my court.
Yeah. I was looking through these the Q&As to see if there was anything else cool that came out. Yeah, I think that's mostly everything. Was there anything else about this Dev Diaries that stuck out to you guys?
We have producer Johan saying that they need to add an event about the invention of football in Britain.
Naturally.
Oh, is that actually Johan in the chat?
It is.
Oh well, hi, welcome to our podcast. Good to see you. Anyway, so
I remember that it was something about the Chinese inventing football, wasn't it? Or is that just like a?
I know there's
a whole bunch of them that came around. And actually, rugby was its own version of football that just diverged.
It's a superior version of. I have to say that as a Welshman.
Whatever you want to say about superior or not, it's its own different version, but they both have the same roots.
My favorite sport wasn't invented until the invention of the automobile, so
well, hey, if you
car rugby, I know.
Yes, exactly. You've also seen Top Gear, then.
If you hire a really
polo.
really good court chaplain, maybe you can invent automobiles within the CK2 time frame.
Well, I think the first
maybe.
steampunk motorized vehicle that worked was like the 1500s or 1600s. It was a novelty item.
I know.
Maybe if Leonardo da Vinci gets the immortal trait.
Yeah, there you go. I was gonna say, I think Da Vinci drew up some like plan for like a steam powered automobile of some kind. But
have you seen the first one? It was
had steam power, but they didn't use it for anything useful.
Oh yeah,
I'm fairly sure I read that.
If you look up Richard Terrific, Puffing Devil, that was like the first like Victorian one, and it's a road vehicle, but they've got like a recreated version down in Cornwall, and it looks terrifying. You basically wrestle this thing down the street as it's like puffing away. There's no brakes or anything. You just have to slam the thing into reverse if you want to stop. So, but it's great. It's really
it wasn't the Byzantines. It was the actual proper, original. Shouldn't say proper because the Byzantines were Roman, but the original Roman Empire, the 1st century BC, the Aeolipile was the first steam engine. And that was in the 1st century BC.
Didn't they pull up from a shipwreck a working mechanical device that was dated pre-Roman Empire, I thought?
I know there was the Baghdad battery that they found.
I was about to mention that as well.
It was like from ancient Sumeria, which again seems like something where they figured out they could generate a current using acids, and then they didn't do anything useful with it. It's like
I think they used it to gild things, did they not? Or that was one of the theories. Or
I don't know if they ever figured out what it actually was for. But
that's it.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Electroshock therapy.
The Antikythera mechanism is an ancient Greek analog computer used to predict astronomical positions and eclipses for calendar and astrological purposes, decades in advance.
Wow. Huh.
That was pulled up from a shipwreck.
Wow.
And nowadays we have people thinking the world is flat.
This is a flat Earth friendly podcast, Lambert. I'm not going to take it. No.
Yeah.
Well, then help me out. I'm sorry, this is my last episode.
Maps are
Are you a
flat,
globe
right?
head, Lambert?
Yeah.
I mean,
EU4 proves.
EU5 better be on a globe.
Yeah, no, EU4 proves that the world is flat. Yeah. It just loops.
Does it not prove it's a cylinder?
Yeah. It was actually until Imperator I thought it was flat. I thought it was round when it started curving,
Yeah. Anyway, second Dev Diary we got this week, which is the last Dev Diary of the year for Stellaris, was kind of going over the things that they said they wanted to work on, which ones of them they have already worked on, which ones they're currently working on. So we're getting Origins in the next expansion. We're getting more Federation depth and a Galactic Council in the next expansion. They also mentioned they've done a lot of work on sectors and automation. I don't know. Like the sectors have just never worked for me, and I don't know. Like I couldn't tell you what you would have to do to make them work right because it's you know, it's not my specialty. But
they fixed some things when they made it so that sectors automatically just group together and you don't assign them. But then it made things worse because you have like one planet all by its lonesome and it's its whole sector, and then you've got another sector with like 20 planets in it, and it's just I turn off sector view. I know myself when I play.
I don't having it on or off doesn't matter to me because I don't use them. I don't automate my sectors at all.
Yeah, I'm too much of a control freak.
I use them for the governors to get the bonus, but that's it.
Here's the thing, like Stellaris originally was designed by Henrik Faraeus, who also designed Crusader Kings 2, and I think the idea is that they were going to work like vassals in CK2, but they never have, is the thing. Like your sector governors are never that important. Like they're never causing conflict. They're never causing, internal problems or instability. There. You never have to placate them. Like it kind of like takes the whole reason that vassals in CK2 are interesting and just turns it into like, this is just an option that exists for if you don't want to play the game as much. Like if you just want to, set the AI to take care of certain stuff, which I guess has some value if you're, playing like 150 planet empire. You obviously don't want to micromanage all of that, but I feel like
I do.
I mean, I usually end up micromanaging all of my planets, but
See, when I do
Johan's actually saying that sectors were originally his design.
Oh, sectors were Johan's design. Okay, it was there to remove micromanagement when it scales to large empires. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So I think it does that well, but I also think that sectors could be more interesting as story generators, and that would make me care about them a little bit more.
They could manage a little better. They're better than they used to be, but the only time I use them is when I do a really large empire on stream. And even then, I still personally manage like the core 2 or 3 sectors before I start conquering. After that, it's just kind of like, toss the planets in a sector, tell them to make food, and hopefully they survive. If I have to go put down a rebellion or 2, I'll do that. But I can't be bothered to control 200 planets.
The change to empire-wide food made them a lot more valuable as sectors.
Yes.
Before the empire-wide food, it was very not good. I still don't use them. I'd rather just manage the planets myself.
So they also mentioned...
but that's a good thing, right? Because it's down to personal choice in the end, right? It's like if you have a type like, us where you sort of
micro versus macro.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
So the other thing they talked a little bit about was civic flavor and how they've done some work on certain civics, but they feel like it isn't finished yet. I'm curious, do you guys happen to have off the top of your head like a favorite current civic and then like a civic that you would most like to see get some sort of a rework to work better, either mechanically or thematically?
Yeah, my favorite is still making a sort of space Ming with a Byzantine bureaucracy, inward perfectionist, and just making it as bureaucratic as possible. So, and that's quite nice because it's very unique. I think inward perfectionist especially, any civic that just changes the gameplay style almost completely is a good civic in my book. And the rest should be sort of flavors, especially ones that come with like custom jobs. Byzantine bureaucracy, for example.
Yeah, I like
great,
those.
Fantastic. Or one that has nobles, beautiful.
What did I just play in the charity stream this past week? I can't remember what it's called. It's is it Technocracy? Let me pull up my image of my empire. But that one, which gives you new jobs at your capitals, that allow you to have scientists there to make more science. Frankly, I just love
like
science in 4X games.
Science director or something.
Science directorate, that's the government type.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
I know which one you're talking about. I can't think of the name of it right now.
The Technocracy. It is Technocracy.
Okay, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I quite like determined exterminators. That's always fun because then you don't have to worry about, filthy Xenos. You just purge away, and that kind of satisfies my inner 40k fanboy.
But you're a xenophile, and you get all the different types of people into your empire, and then you can settle all the planets.
You've just made Stellaris into a game I don't like.
but here's the thing: if you're a machine, you can just go to whatever planet you want. It doesn't matter. See, I'm a machine empire. I love playing machine empires and hive minds. Those are probably my favorite.
I don't think I've played a hive mind that isn't a ravenous horde yet. Like, I don't think I've ever not taken that civic.
It can be interesting to try to play straight like diplomacy with a hive mind, because they are inherently distrusted by everybody, and you can just be like, no, really, I'm cool. We're cool. Does it make you feel better if I say we? Yeah. So, I would definitely like to see more flavor on exactly the civics that Loris is talking about, which are also some of my favorites, the ones that add new jobs and stuff. Yeah. Like if there were more specific events or like more unique, edicts or something that came with those that let you have a little bit more of, let it have a little bit more of an impact in how you run your empire past just the decisions you make in character creation. Like, give me some tools, some cool new tools that I can deploy as needed later on. Those are kind of the civics I think I'd like to most see added.
Yeah. Also, like, it doesn't really need to be changes to the existing civics too. It just needs more civics, as far as I'm concerned. More is better.
I generally have an idea in mind before I start playing. I'll create my empire, and then I'll choose civics that sort of fit with that.
Yeah.
So if I wanted to make a space dwarf empire, I'd choose things that help me with my mineral generation, that kind of thing. I generally just go with the kind of role play. I think that's where Stellaris kind of is the best.
Definitely, 100%.
That's some of the most intriguing thing about it, is you're in designing your empire, and it's different every time if you want it to be.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You can min-max it if that's how you want to play, or you can totally just, we're highly decadent and we like slaves, but we start with no slaves, so we're gonna go find someone to enslave.
I kind of don't like slaves.
I don't either. That was just
Well, I think
I'd rather have robots.
I think there is part of the appeal of Stellaris is that you can play as the bad guys. And it is fun to play as the bad guys sometimes, and it's
and pretend that they're the good guys, like 40k.
I mean, pretty much,
from their point of view,
most bad guys throughout history have thought that they were actually good guys.
I don't think anyone actually thinks they're a bad guy when they're a bad guy, right?
Yeah, but we should leave that particular part way out of here.
Yeah.
I think the sort of more interesting things in fiction, especially science fictions, are the morally ambiguous, like, good guys, like in 40k. Yeah. In Warhammer Fantasy too, we're not the good guys.
The cool thing about Warhammer is that it's like nobody's the good guys, so no matter what side you pick, it's just, kind of jerks fighting other different types of jerks.
They all think they are in the right, other than the Dark Eldar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's true.
I think you've scrolled down too far, because there is something in that list that I think is kind of necessary that we talk about.
Sure.
Espionage is one of the things on that bullet point list. Yeah. And that's really kind of the thing that I've been wanting for Stellaris for an awfully long time. Not being able to see everything in your enemy's empire is what it should be like. I shouldn't know that they've colonized this system. Maybe I will have to scan it and there's a blip that's just moved across the star. Does that mean that they've set up shop there? I don't know. Let's go and find out. Mm-hmm. Things like stealth ships could be a big part of that as well. That could change the warfare aspect as well. Like stealth torpedo boats. Yes,
hidden
please.
Nationality ships, so you can like fight people, but without
that kind of
showing
feels
your
like it's touching on
nationality.
what we learned about the new changes in Hoi 4 last week. The intel and the spy ships and spy planes and stuff.
Yeah, espionage has been a factor of Paradox games that haven't really been explored in as much depth as I'd really like to. So it's always been like a big desire for a lot of people. Like anytime there's an EU4 update, people are asking, is there going to be more like espionage? And espionage ideas in EU4 right now is not very good. So yeah, espionage is always something that needs to be expanded on, and hopefully this is going to do it when they get around to it.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I think the most interesting thing on the list for me personally is the religion one. Hopefully having sort of a more flavorful religion with religious traits and stuff and doctrines. That's what I'm most excited about.
But they're not exactly all tied to religion.
No, exactly. yeah. But have heresies and stuff too, as like opposing factions.
CK2 is going to invade Stellaris.
Oh yeah, if they, that's the system of religion that they have in CK3. Like, if they put that, if they just take a little morsel of that and put it in Stellaris, I would love that. I think
that'd be awesome. Agamede says, "Fun fact: there was a commented resource on release that was supposed to be used for cloaking ships. So they've always had the idea. I want to see it. I want to see it in action."
Which, speaking of seeing things, they do have this lovely image of the Federation.
Yes. So they've changed how the kind of meritocracy succession type works, where you can set it to either the Federation presidency will always go to the most strongest economic, diplomatic, technological, or military member, which I think is a kind of a cool, elegant solution. I think before it was like... there was a specific succession type that was just for strongest military, I want to say, and they've kind of tweaked it so
it's actually saying fleets, because I don't think it said that when I saw this at PDXCon. It just said strongest for succession power.
Yeah, and then there was another one that was diplomatic weight, I think.
Yep.
And they've now combined that into the strongest, to where you can have a technocratic Federation, purely,
who's got the most technology. They get to pick everything.
Yeah.
Which I'm just imagining, like, all the leaders coming to a science fair and just like presenting their inventions before the Federation Congress to determine who gets to be the next president.
Yeah,
maybe it's like battle bots. I don't know.
Some kind of technology sharing
challenge.
Yeah.
The challenge where you sort of have to have a duel. Maybe it could be like robot wars.
Yeah. No, that would be rad. I mean, we already are going to get one that's like based on the strongest psychic or whatever.
Yeah, that's brilliant. More stuff like that would be fantastic. Yeah, you can have a psychic duel.
Yeah.
Oh, that's I'm going to have to go and look for that one, because that sounds awesome.
Yeah, and then the economy one, I guess you just bid, like you have an auction, like who wants to be Federation president next.
The economy one is basically how real world works.
I was gonna say, more or less.
Well, the strongest economy is basically how it works right now. Who's ever got this, has the most economic power rules the Federation, which quite often means if you're in a Federation with a megacorp, they're in charge.
Yeah.
Which
I guess I guess you don't really spend money. It's more like they look at your tax returns and then determine who's the richest, and then that's
whoever's dodged the most tax can be president.
If they see your tax returns.
Yeah, we've removed any need to like engage in bribery. It's just like if you're rich, you win. So that's gonna be kind of cool. Definitely looking forward to checking out the Federation's expansion. And the last thing they mentioned is that Jaymore is actually moving to Imperator, and Obi-Dobi is going to be the new producer on Stellaris. And he's been working on Stellaris forever, so that's cool. That kind of worked his way up to that spot. Nothing really mechanical about that, other than kind of a changing of the guard. Anything else you guys thought was cool or interesting about this dev diary before we move on to Hearts of Iron?
I like our little Santa hat on our starfish alien.
Where is the? Oh, there we go.
Yeah,
that is cool.
And the baby hanging off the horn.
He's wearing a smaller starfish up there as well. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Anyway, Hearts of Iron 4, we got quite the dev diary this week. The long-awaited Portugal tree we finally got a look at, and it's large, as most of the recent trees have been. They have a kind of an interesting political setup though, because they can take kind of a centrist route that lets them go democratic or fascist, I think is how it works. Or no,
monarchist, I think. Yeah, democratic or monarchist.
You can pick either Popular Front or Estado Novo and then go down the democracy tree. But then they also have, each of them has either the communist path or the fascist path, respectively, which is interesting. I don't think we've ever had that before, where you have you have a mutually exclusive political decision where either way you can still pick the middle path, regardless of which ones of those you take.
Yep, it is interesting and rather complex looking tree.
Yeah. Yeah, they've kind of spread out their military and industry focuses throughout other trees, which is another new thing we haven't really seen before.
I do want to nitpick. I don't want to be too negative because I love the trees.
Oh, go for it. Yeah.
But I think the icons, something off about them. You know, it doesn't.
Yeah.
They don't quite.
They're very bright.
I don't know. Yeah.
Like the
don't
one
think
for
we
the
see it on the
Fifth
Nation
Empire
Arms.
down there. It's very, very bright and colorful, which kind of it doesn't quite fit with the theme. So much in Hoi
Yeah, it
Ford
reminds-
is
Kingdom
very
United.
monotone.
It
Yeah.
reminds me of like modded icons a lot more. I think reminds
Yeah.
me of something you'd see in
Well, I think-
Kaiserreich or something.
I think a lot of the original icons they made were kind of more drab and kind of more like almost like a GI theme color palette, and since then they've sort of expanded out from that a little bit.
Well, I can see that, but I think the two like worst defenders, I don't really use the worst defender, but like the two
Yeah.
that don't seem to fit is the Fifth Empire and the Kingdom United.
Yeah.
They're just
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
they're like Crayola bright.
Yeah.
They are.
They really jump out.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but that's a sort of artistic
Yeah.
thing. Sort of-
Just
Well,
very
you're the
small
artist
artistic.
to be
Yeah.
honest.
Yeah. Yeah, I can
It's the same.
totally see
Same
what
with the
you guys are talking
national
about.
values. If you look at the the national, it's again it just looks, the aesthetic looks off to me. I don't know.
Yeah,
what that is, but-
I can see what you're saying with that. Yeah. Yeah, I think that this is gonna be just a really interesting expansion as far as like I don't know how things are gonna interact is one of my big questions for
Well-
like Portugal gets these focuses where like they can take over the Iberian Peninsula, but then does that, if you have a Spanish player playing in multiplayer, like what are they going to get, like a pop-up that allows them to accept being annexed by Portugal or go to war with you? Like
I assume so. Yeah.
yeah,
Yep, that would only make sense. But
yeah.
it's,
But yeah, there's
also,
there's some cool
it's just oh.
yeah.
It's also
I think there
just-
might be a slight delay, and that's why we keep talking over each other a little bit.
It's
Yeah.
also just interesting because up till this point, Spain has kind of been, I guess I'll play Spain.
Yeah,
And, whatever decision you make, fascist, if you're not even playing Spain, if you're playing somewhere else and the AI is dealing with it, fascist wins a good 70 to 80% of the time. And if you want communism to win, you've really got to push it. It has just kind of been there. Oh, the Spanish Civil War happened. Okay. It's like, Amelia Earhart pop up or the Hindenburg
Yeah.
disaster pop up. It just
Yeah, yeah.
happens.
yeah.
And
Yeah, well, and it's interesting that they've introduced these like discrete mechanics. This is going back to older dev diaries, obviously, but since we didn't get a chance to talk about them when they came out, we might as well bring them up now. But the fact that they're introducing all these discrete mechanics to like slow down, like the speed of the Spanish Civil War, because with default Hearts of Iron 4 mechanics, it just can't really last as long as it did historically.
Yeah.
Which makes me ask questions
unless
about.
you have players on both sides working to make it last.
True.
It can last a very long time then.
Right. Yeah. Mostly if you're against the AI is when this comes up. But it makes me wonder, like, well, if the base mechanics are having such a hard time modeling this conflict that happened during this era to the point where you have to create discrete mechanics specifically for this region and this specific conflict to make it play out historically, would it maybe not be better to just go back and take a look at the base mechanics to figure out why it is that keeps happening? But I also, I know that it's a lot more work to like rework the entire land combat game just so the Spanish Civil War can work right.
It's tough, right? Because you have to work. The fall of France was incredibly rapid. Same with Poland, and just generally the entire German Blitzkrieg was really quickly. So you have to balance how quick that was in comparison to like the Spanish Civil War and also the Japanese War, which lasted for ages and is far too quick in Hoi 4 currently.
And there's also only so much you can program with AI currently.
Yeah. Although I think this comes with like a raft of AI improvements. The big one is America's AI, where they don't just swimming around in the sea the entire time because they're sending troops from one flank to the other.
Right.
And Russia too. It's like, about war with Germany, I know the greatest place. I'm going to put all my troops on the border of Turkmenistan. That's where I'm going to put them all. And then halfway through Siberia, they'll go, I changed my mind, and go all the way back to the other front.
Yeah.
And that's when Turkmenistan attacks.
In this game, I played
Everything
on Sunday.
changed when Turkmenistan attacked.
We had fascist Canada and fascist Mexico invaded the U.S. Canada and Mexico were players. The U.S. was AI.
Like you do. Yeah.
No, yeah. So Mexico, there were some U.S. troops down there, and they fought it out. Mexico was winning. The Canadian troops invaded from Toronto down into New York and stuff, and there were very few troops there. Most of the U.S. troops were on the very long border down through the middle over to Vancouver. The war started. They all picked up. Instead of walking across the border where there were no Canadian troops to stop them, they got on boats, went to Alaska, and invaded that way. And they invaded like a province, and then they turned around and went back and crossed the entire country to go fight the Canadian troops over in New York.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah. It reminds me of the time, it was like right after Together for Victory came out, and I was playing Australia, and I got naval invaded by Japan, and they just had one division wandering around the outback until he died. Just from attrition. Like, they never followed up with like a foothold or anything. It was just like, all right, we're going to naval invade Australia with one division, and then we're going to go conquer the outback. Yeah.
It's like that Japanese soldier that was like found on the islands, but basically in Ayers Rock or something instead.
Right. But yeah, they've got some other cool, some other interesting stuff. They have like a focus path that lets them decide between whether they want to focus on getting a lot of industry going quickly or get like a bonus to civilian factory production, which will help them better in the long run by developing their domestic industries, which is kind of cool. And they have a monarchist path where you can restore the Portuguese Brazilian Empire and bring Portugal back into the fold.
Yeah.
Which
I think was missing from the Spanish tree because I want to reclaim Colombia and Mexico back again.
Yeah. So yeah, it seems like there's going to be quite a bit of stuff to do as Portugal. To the point that I feel like some of these minor nations that have gotten expansions more recently are actually like more fleshed out than some of the ones that have been in the game for a long time.
Yeah, I think there's just been I like the term feature creep, and I think we've got like focus tree creep at the moment. Which is not a bad thing as long as they go back and increase the amount that are in the old focus trees as well.
I think that's the plan. I mean, you look at Britain and France, which have been improved massively.
Or the US got a whole new one with Man the Guns.
Yeah. The far superior one too, And Japan, of course,
Yeah.
How to run it.
So there's hope yet.
Yeah, I reckon the Soviets are probably next, aren't they? Like that's my guess.
They're the
and they'll probably bunch in Turkey and maybe some
Germany
Baltics.
hasn't been reworked that I know of.
Yeah, they had the Empire, didn't they? They got the Kaiser, Return of the Kaiser now.
They did,
Kaiser.
yeah.
Yes, they did add the Kaiser. Never mind.
But I would say
if you play Germany, you don't get the Kaiser back. There's something wrong with you, as far as I'm concerned. It's just way cooler.
And that's the other
Objectively
thing.
cooler.
Yeah, I think that like even the German focus tree rework that they did recently is not quite up to the standard of like what Spain and Portugal are getting in this expansion. Like there's almost 3 tiers of detail now, and like they need to rework some of the majors because they just keep becoming more detailed every expansion.
Well, I think Mexico hit the was the high mark before. I think Spain is going to be the new high mark, and it's going to be hard to beat that Spanish one.
Focus tree is, you can go democratic with the Mexican focus tree and still declare on like the U.S. and join the fascists.
Yeah, I do that. It's like it's bugged at the moment, but you can get a leader portrait, which is a cardinal, and if you go democratic and Christian, and the portrait is fantastic, and you can conquer all of.
We actually found a bug with when Canada, someone's playing Canada and they go fascist, they lose the option they lose one of their focus. They can't select it because England has to focus on reuniting the empire or something, but they can't do that anymore because their new focus tree, so the Canadian focus tree is broken.
Yeah. Well, I think this is always a problem when you're implementing trees. There's a problem with India too. Like if India goes independent because Britain has gone fascist or communist, they can't continue their focus tree because it's a requirement to be a vassal of someone. So there's a few problems.
That needs looking at then. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Need some patches.
Any final thoughts on the dev diaries from this week?
Great portraits.
Yeah. The portraits
That's
are very
something they've
good.
done really well. The aesthetics of the portraits. I can't wait to see the car lists because it's probably not my favorite. Don't get me. I'm not a car list, but they're so goofy. That's a thing that's happened. And you get pictures of them like standing there, like in big red berets, and like a priest next to them blessing them or something in World War II. It's so strange,
Yeah.
So to see a carless king would be, hopefully the portrait's good. A big red beret.
For
That'd be
sure.
quite funny.
So kind of our bigger topic this week is, since it's, the end of the decade, everybody's talking about the games of the decade. Mine personally is Crusader Kings 2, like no question.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like for strategy games, it's kind of been the decade of Paradox. I mean, it's kind of been the decade of grand strategy, breaking through out of its very small, like, war game adjacent niche, and sort of becoming this fairly
more mainstream.
Maybe not quite mainstream. I don't know.
More mainstream.
Stellaris
strategy.
feels mainstream, right? Like I think Stellaris and CK2 at least kind of have broken through into the mainstream in some interesting ways. But yeah, I feel like this whole decade, as far as strategy games go, has kind of been shaped by that in a lot of ways. I guess you have to sort of define what a grand strategy game is, which I would be interested to hear you guys' definitions of this. Mine is sort of, I boil it down to, it's a strategy game where your domestic policy matters as much as or more than your foreign policy.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
I'd say that's definitely part of the definition.
Yeah.
I'd say the biggest part for me of what makes it a grand strategy is your actions don't define the game. Other actors are working at the same time to do their own thing. I don't know how to put that into a short sound bite for what a grand strategy game is. But
then you're
that's got to be a
podcast.
well, let me give it a crack.
Is where every move you make matters. A grand strategy game is not just every move you make matters, but every move that every other AI, every little detail can flip a switch and change the game forever.
Yeah.
It's like a strategy game, but grander.
There's my
There we
soundbite.
go. Yeah.
And usually they have maps.
Yeah. It's an ecosystem. It's with the exception of Stellaris, which is also, kind of a hybrid 4X, I think Grand Strategy is also sort of defined by the fact that it's looking to portray a scenario that isn't necessarily balanced. You've got large players, you've got medium-sized players, you've got small players, and it's designed for you to be able to play as any of them.
Well, yeah,
whereas,
compare
something like Civ, everybody starts out on a relatively even footing.
Yeah.
Well, even if you go to more of a real-time strategy, something like Age of Empires, unless you're playing a special campaign, everyone starts the same. They're specialized with maybe terms of units and buildings, but they're all the same. It comes down a lot more to equal skill. A grand strategy game, every start is different.
Yeah.
Which is why Stellaris fits more into the 4X. Well, that's part of the reason Stellaris fits more into the 4X than grand strategy.
Yeah.
Right. But it's, at the same time, it has a lot of those elements of keeping your population happy and, population demographics and population growth and stuff that, Civ kind of has some of that on a much broader kind of stroke level. But yeah, I feel like Grand Strategy drills down a little bit closer to trying to feel like a real world than most other types of games do.
And you don't have a definitive win condition.
Yeah.
Well,
So Casey Guy just said there, the AI doing stuff that has nothing to do with winning the game. I'd say that I'd expand that to the player as well. There's no definitive win condition.
There's the losing. You cease to exist.
Yeah.
So essentially it comes down to being a survival game.
Yeah.
True. Yeah.
Fair.
I've certainly played some games of CK2 that felt that way. Yeah, it's interesting because I don't feel like there was a lot of a conversation about grand strategy as a genre before the 2010s.
Well, I do feel that Paradox games have sort of coined the phrase.
Yeah.
Because I would count Total War games as grand strategy, but no one would reference them as grand strategy before Paradox came along.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's sort of this orbit that includes stuff like Total War and includes stuff like Civ that could either be generously called grand strategy or at least grand strategy adjacent, that it existed before the sort of Paradox boom that happened in the last 10 years. But I don't think you would have ever called any of those grand strategy games before, CK2 got popular, probably.
No.
Well, if we're talking about just the 2010s, Victoria 2 came out in 2010.
Right.
Indeed. That was the first one.
Yeah. So we can start it off there, I guess.
I remember that. I don't know if that's showing my age. Because I've actually been playing almost a decade. I can pin it down, like I said last week, pin it down to the exact date because it was about a few weeks after Civilization 5 launched, which is, I think it was like September, sometime was around my birthday. But it was just before Divine Wind came out. And that's what I've been playing. I think back then they were definitely niche. I've been told that basically Paradox got most of its money from a mixture of Mountain Blade, which was a huge runaway success, and Magicka.
Oh, yes.
That's another. I would say Mountain Blade is kind of a grand strategy game too.
Also came out in 2010.
Yeah,
Warband at least.
It's also a melee combat game and sort of an RPG. But yeah, I would say that would probably fit at least within the orbit of grand strategy for sure.
Yeah.
And with Paradox being the one that published the first Mountain Blade and Warband. It fits into the podcast. Let's talk about it.
Bannerlord wins.
It is a strategy game to a degree.
I've been playing that for ages too, to be fair.
Yeah.
I played
The
it
modern
back when it was
community is phenomenal.
the first one, it was like Zendar. I don't know if anyone you played it when it was Zendar Basalt Mine.
I
remember that?
I don't remember that, but I did play the first one.
Because
I thought it was a story game when I bought Mountain Blade and Warband at the same time. So I played Mountain Blade for about 25 hours, and then I was like, okay, let's see what Mountain Blade 2 is. Oh, it's the same map. It's just better in every conceivable
and it
way.
has another faction.
It was far less janky, I'm pretty sure,
yeah.
because
Well,
We've
the
got-
original was just very clunky fun, but very clunky.
I discovered Mountain Blade about the same time I discovered CK2, so about 2012.
Yeah.
And so Warband was already out. They two
Yeah.
came packaged together. Once I Googled and took a look, I've never even opened regular Mountain Blade.
Yeah, I haven't either. I started with Warband.
Yep, it's never been
it-
installed, nothing, compared to
Yeah.
over 100 hours in Warband.
Yeah, I've played a ton of Warband, and I've obviously played a ton of the Viking Conquest, which was
See,
originally a mod for Warband, and then
Walder.
eventually was released as its own own game.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
well,
have.
there were some like really good mods for the original. There was a Lord of the Rings one, which was really good. And I think it was like a Star Wars one too, which was
That's
again
hilarious.
very janky, but it was pretty
Did
good.
you guys ever play the Napoleonic one, the Fire and Sword?
Didn't like it.
I
I
haven't.
didn't-
It just never interested me to open it up, I guess.
Guns
It's like
didn't
Caribbean,
really
yeah.
fit into Mountain Blade for me. They
No.
they never aimed well. They didn't. It just wasn't a thing for me. But
We have a lot of people in chat, by the way, who are very optimistic about the fact that Bannerlord is going to make its stated release date. So I'm not going to jinx it, but you guys are welcome to.
Very
play
well,
the crap out of that game.
yeah, so I was when I was at Gamescom last year. I
think
was
I added to
going
my-
in and out of that booth like nothing else playing that game. I think I just lived in the Bannerlord booth.
I think I added
Yeah.
it to my wish list on Steam, like what, 8 years ago? No,
Yeah.
7 years ago.
Yeah, seriously. Like it's.
Well, when was that first trailer released? It was just like there was no gameplay or anything.
It was
I'm gonna look
ages
it up.
ago. It was ages ago.
It must be
yeah.
approaching like 5 years or something, maybe even longer now.
Welcome to NoCB, the Mountain Blade podcast.
2012. The
2012.
27th of September 2012.
Nice.
Oh my
Wow,
god.
so that was during my first 6 months as an intern at PC Gamer. Like that was like, yeah.
So-
that was forever ago.
Yeah, so that would have come out right when I was discovering Mountain Blade.
Yeah,
Yeah, probably. you started playing Mountain Blade when Bannerlord was announced.
I'm just glad that they made enough money off of Bannerlord and its various spin-offs
Yeah.
that they were able to keep developing it for this long.
Well, it shows how massively successful that game was because they've managed to
Yeah.
run a pretty big studio.
Well, and
Yeah.
there's still a lot of people use the multiplayer.
Oh yeah.
Yes,
Huge.
yeah.
now.
It's very big. The multiplayer in
I will
Bannerlord,
say-
by the way, is fantastic. You basically command like a small little regiment of AI, and it's great fun. It's really,
Also,
really good.
The announcement teaser for Bannerlord, one of the top comments is, "It's been 4 years and it's still not harvesting season." Posted 3 years ago.
Somebody needs to somebody needs to remember to go back on there and be like, it's been 4 years since this comment and it's still not harvesting season. once that comment is 4 years old, yeah. Yeah. I unsurprisingly, people who like Paradox games also tend to like games like Mountain Blade. So yeah, that's probably one of my most anticipated games of hopefully 2020, please. But yeah, I think one of the other big things that happened was just kind of this gradual ramp up in visual fidelity. I mean, even if you look at going from, I mean, it's really been every game that came out since maybe Hoi 2. Like even Hoi 2 to EU3, EU3 to Vicky 2, Vicky 2 to CK2, CK2 to EU4, which like EU4 I think was the first Paradox game that I thought
I love
was like
how you're jumping over the single games that we just never talk about.
Well, I haven't played much of those ones. Is the only thing.
Even within EU3, if you played the original EU3 and then after
Yeah.
Divine Wind, the graphics is just a vast improvement.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah,
Sengoku there. I don't think I've played that one.
Sengoku is
Goku
it's a good
is-
game and it's beautiful.
It's really interesting if you've played both CK and then CK2, or even just CK2, is you can see a lot of things in Sengoku that are like how vanilla CK2 was back in 2012, 2014, including you remember now you right click on a portrait and you get the pop-up menu of, plot to kill, arranged marriage, arranged betrothal. And it used to take you to a whole other screen. Sengoku does that. And just sort of the layout and the feel. Except there is totally no CB in Sengoku. You have a permanent CB on everyone.
So the perfect game for this podcast.
Yes.
Yeah, there we go. Well, that's kind of what the Sengoku period was. It's like, we're not going to pretend that we have a good reason to go to war anymore. It's just everybody wants to be the emperor. That's my CB.
And there's a lot of like capturing
Shogun,
hostages, and that's how you ensure peace in Sengoku. Essentially, is by taking the other like daimyo's children and as hostage for ages. Which is historical, but
it's effective. I'm surprised it doesn't happen as much in CK2.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that really kind of opened up the genre to people who wouldn't have given it another look before. Just this kind of like gradual increase in fidelity, and I even include myself in that. Like I said last episode, I'm shallow. I'm distracted by shiny things. Part of what put me off about CK2 originally is that it didn't look very much like a modern game, and then EU4 was announced the very next year, and that was the first one that I felt like did kind of look like a modern game. And then, the jump from Hoi 3 to Hoi 4 is just like a monumental shift from this looks like an old school war game to like this looks like a globe
video game
with like actual like 3D World War II battles going on it.
They got rid of the NATO icons, which I really appreciate.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing with just the images of between CK2 to CK3.
Yeah, and Imperator like is just another step up. Like Imperator looks like
stunning.
Genuinely next gen, like in its visual quality, which is not something I ever would have expected from Paradox, 7-8 years ago.
And then CK3 looks gorgeous, right?
So. Oh yeah.
I didn't know I could be sexually attracted to a map until I saw Imperator.
Yeah.
And I'm just hoping that CK3 is just going to continue it and look even better.
Yeah.
Oh, here, let me see.
Well, it does.
I
mean,
a lovely image, which was put together by Agamade of England in all 3 CK games.
Let me see if I can pull this up on the stream. Yeah.
We should probably describe it for the folks who are audio only.
On the left, we've got something that looks really bad. In the middle, we've got something that looks better. But then on the right, we've got something that looks legitimately fucking amazing.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, so it's a little bit compressed. But yeah, this is like a rough comparison of CK1 versus CK2 versus CK3.
We will make sure, if you're just listening to this and if you want to see the image, we will retweet Agamade's original post of this.
Yeah.
You should also put in all of the games. Just make a collage of England. It's the best collage that could possibly exist.
I do. Yeah. I am one of these people who thinks there's a charm to the old versions, though. Well, I like how badly drawn England is because it's. Look at Wales, for example. It looks nothing like Wales, but that's what ancient maps looked like.
Yeah.
See,
I don't know if you've seen the Mappa Mundi. Mappa Mundi looks nothing like the world's.
No,
but it's really interesting.
Imagine what Imperator map would look like if instead of using the actual map of the world, they used what the cartographers of the time.
Oh god,
that would be
looks like.
Yeah. Well, aren't Roman maps? They're essentially like road maps, so they're very long images that are of roads. Essentially, Imperator would just be a very long scrolling screen that you have to conquer your way along.
One of my top posts on r/EU4 is actually if the culture map of EU4 was made by people who lived in the time period of EU4. And it's just like everywhere else is or Europe is normal and everywhere else just says savages.
Oh.
So yeah, there would be funny to make a map game that is like how people at the time actually saw the world instead of how we see it now. Yeah.
That's Victoria too, though. They do that, You have the uncivilized peoples and you have the and then you have the westernized. And I quite like the sort of it's quite tongue in cheek that, I quite like that.
Right, yeah.
It's tongue-in-cheek, but it's also how people thought.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. But
would that count as tongue-in-cheek?
And then we have to add in sea monsters everywhere.
Yeah.
Now,
yeah. Well, I think... Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Now, I think the one thing that has not quite, or did you have something to say, Rose, before we
I was just
move
going to
on?
talk about the CK maps
Yeah.
there.
Oh, go for it. Yeah.
Well, because we know in CK2 you just use your scroll wheel and you can scroll in and out, zoom in. And we assume it's going to work the same way for CK3. CK1 was zoom buttons.
Oh no.
Oh,
There were only
no.
like 3 or 4. And when you zoom in all the way, it's just...
It hurts
Question.
us, precious.
Question:
Yes.
Could you move the map with the middle mouse button click?
No. Not really.
Okay, well, no, it's disgusting then.
I mean, I could fire
yeah.
up the
Only
game
way
and
to
check
move
for
the map.
you, but I don't think you could. I just remember having to do the edge scrolling.
Well, that actually, I mean, that dovetails pretty nicely into what I was about to say, which is sort of the one thing I think Grand Strategy has not quite gotten right yet. That could bring it to even higher heights in the next decade. Is I feel like they still have just not gotten that good at teaching you what you're supposed to do. Stellaris maybe being an exception because it is more of a 4X game, and they have Veer, which works really well to kind of introduce you to stuff gradually. But like, I was not impressed with the Imperator tutorial. I've learned almost every Paradox game by watching other people play it, not by
Well,
the in-game utilities.
so I remember when I was first learning how to play EU3,
Yeah.
the tutorial didn't work for me. I click on the tutorial, it would crash the game.
Oh,
So like, that's how good the tutorial used to be. I don't know if it was a problem with my client or it was a wide
So we
scale
have
problem.
made some
But
progress, yeah.
yeah.
And then there's also the issue of like, if you load up the original CK2 tutorial, and let's say you've never played the game before, you got all the DLCs in a bundle, and you don't learn how to do a quarter of what the DLCs let you do, or even the
Yeah.
free patches let you do in the tutorial.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. I guess I don't update them. I don't mind that too much though, because I quite like sort of it's kind of like playing a puzzle game, working out how to play Paradox games. I don't
Well, I
mind.
do hear that
as long as the wikis are updated.
I do hear at least for CK3, they're planning on at least like 2 levels of tutorial. One will be a very detailed one, sort of like the Stellaris tutorial that we have.
Yeah.
And then the other one will give you sort of pop-ups going, hey, maybe you should get married. Here's a few eligible ladies.
So
Yeah.
it's basically going to turn into your parents. Hey, maybe you should get married. Hey, when are we going to have grandkids?
Hey, you have a claim on
Yeah.
this county next door. You want to go attack them?
Oh, yeah.
I
that's-
appreciate
My
that.
parents were
Even
always saying that to
Yeah,
me too.
every holiday dinner, it's just like, why have you not conquered Essex yet?
Yeah. Drive for Saxon's
because
back out of
nobody
England, my
wants
child.
it.
Yeah.
But even their grand strategy games, it's not even just that with the tutorials. If we step into other games that Paradox has published, Paradox Interactive,
Yeah.
like Surviving Mars, the tutorial series for that was done by Quill 18.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh,
Because, the
know that.
in-game didn't do a good job of telling you what
it
you should be
didn't.
doing at all. Yeah.
Nope.
No.
And so his videos are there, like you load up the game. I don't know if they're still there, but for the longest time, you could click on his video in the game and it would pop you into that to watch.
yeah. That's that's not a bad idea. I quite like that
Yeah.
idea of commissioning YouTubers. I say that because
And they did. They used Many True Nerd for
YouTubers.
Imperator.
Give us a call.
to do this.
NoCBcast@gmail.com.
I'd happily make a CK3 tutorial.
That's a really good
Absolutely.
idea.
I mean, I probably will anyway, so it's like, if you want to pay me
yeah.
to do it, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I genuinely quite like that idea.
They did have
So-
Many a True Nerd did the Imperator one, but the game's changed so much; those videos are virtually useless now,
Right.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
and they're not even a
I
year
do
old.
plan on. I do plan on making a tutorial for Imperator in January. So I don't know if they want to put them in the game, then I'm not going to say no to that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's for pitch.
Yeah, we'll have PayPal links. Yeah.
You know what?
So-
I think like a comic about tutorials would be really useful too.
A comic-based tutorial, like a funny comic-based tutorial, would legitimately be something I would read. Like that's actually a great idea.
A comic of your parents telling you to press your claim.
For you later, don't worry.
Yeah. So any final thoughts on how grand strategy maybe shaped the decade of the 2010s, or even what you think might be on the horizon for this decade we have right ahead of us?
I honestly think things like Stellaris and the fact that it's more of a 4X game kind of broke a bit of a monopoly that the Sid Meier Civ games have on that genre. And even now we're looking at a new 4X game coming out, which my brain, thank you, pregnancy brain.
Humankind.
Totally, thank you, Humankind.
Yeah.
I was thinking like something world, and I'm like, that's not right.
Yeah. It looks like a really, really good game.
It does.
Yeah.
And
the announcement trailer was not very good, though. I don't want to cast too much shade, but man, I think it was like a sort of Neanderthal man playing
It's
a
so
beatbox.
weird.
And
The
it was,
marketing for that game is so weird.
it's odd, isn't it?
Like, even the most recent trailer they did about, like, designing your leader, like, it seems like they're trying to, like, appeal to the Fortnite crowd, kind of, which economically makes sense, but it's weird.
It's a strange one. Hey,
Yeah.
it might pay off for them. It's a new tech. Yeah, but,
you have to know who you're marketing to.
Have any of you played the Galciv series?
I played it
yes.
some, yeah.
haven't
Adams
actually.
says there, don't forget about the Galciv 2 to Galciv 3 debacle. And now, I haven't played either of the games, but I have heard of people being very upset with Galciv 3. So, anyone who knows about that want to, like, chime in and explain
I
it?
didn't play 2. I've only played 3, actually.
I played about.
I haven't played any of them.
I played a bit more in 2 than I played in 3. It just, if I remember correctly, it just sort of felt flat.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the space games that have come out recently are just trying to be like Master of Orion 2, but with better graphics.
Yeah.
And like Master of Orion 2 was a good game when it came out, but it's kind of like they even made a new Master of Orion with like voice actors from Firefly.
Yes.
And I loaded it up and I was like, this is just Master of Orion 2. Like, I've already played this. Like, I'm kind of over it. Yeah.
I haven't actually played that. I did watch my father play it some because he's been a huge Master of Orion fan since the beginning. And he honestly enjoyed the game. But I think a great part of that was the fact that you could role play when you're playing with your ships. When you enter the battle, you can watch it in real time, kind of like we do with Stellaris.
Yeah, that was cool.
But it's a full cinematic event that's different every time as it plays out the battle, which is honestly amazing. It's a little extra thing, but you need more than that when making a game that's really replayable. Because again, I don't think he's gone through and played a second game in it. I think he just did one game and felt done with it, which is not really what you're looking for in a strategy game. You want someone who can pour hundreds, if not thousands of hours into these games.
Yeah, absolutely.
And buy all your DLC.
All the DLC, yes.
Yeah.
Buy all our DLC.
I think, well, that's a can of worms I wouldn't mind opening. That's definitely a successful model for grand strategy,
It
I think,
is,
ever since for
As long as it's
CK.
balanced well between quality of life, free patches, and honestly new and different content.
Yeah. Well, I know.
Well, you have other companies taking up that model. You like, mentioning the people who made like Amplitude Studios, people who were making Humankind and made Endless Legends, exactly the same DLC model essentially.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and I will definitely do a whole episode on DLC, but I think it is very relevant to the discussion because, it might be a marketing buzzword, but it is true that games as a service has kind of become the big thing over the last 10 years.
And we talk about DLC. If you look at MMOs, the last big MMO that kind of took the world by storm was World of Warcraft.
Exactly.
It charges people what, $10 a month? I think it's gone. I think that's 15. What it is now. 15 something. It charges people monthly. Right. As well as, you want to go to this new continent we put in the game? Sure, you've got to buy our $40 expansion pack.
Yeah.
And DLC
that's basically exactly what I was going to say, yeah.
And DLC is just, it's cutting it down to anywhere from like a $5 to $20 expansion pack once a year. And forget the $10 a month.
Yeah, and we saw like this this big like boom and bust of subscription MMOs right around 2010. Everybody tried to do World of Warcraft, and like they all died off because it's
That's
like,
right.
no, I can't afford to be paying like $10 to $15 to like, you know,
Play
5 or
30
6 different games.
Well,
Right.
there was a whole raft of like so-called like WoW killers, right? There was, you know,
Oh, yeah.
Age of Conan. I don't know if you remember that. There was Warhammer
There's
Online.
the Lord of the Rings one.
Yeah.
I wish
Things online, oh
Warhammer
my
Online
goodness.
had succeeded. I would play the crap out of that.
Yeah. I don't know if
Yeah.
you played Lord of the Rings Online, but that was probably the worst game I've ever played.
Really?
No, I tell you what, it had one redeemable feature. You could upload custom songs, but you could
Yes.
play on custom instruments. So that was quite fun. If you want to have like a game where you go around playing music everywhere,
Oh,
I,
the-
Lord of the Rings Online's for you.
the Star Wars Galaxies, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, you could play someone who never did combat, which was actually really cool. My grandfather played
Yeah.
that, and he was just a master architect, and he went around. I mean, he could shoot a gun if he got attacked by a wild critter, but the only quest and stuff he did was building things.
Yeah, well, that's why I think I didn't hate Lord of the Rings Online, because I didn't really play Lord of the Rings Online that much. I used it mostly as a virtual chat room where I could go exercise
Play
my
music.
Tolkien lore like EPing. I had an elf with this big elaborate backstory who had a name in Cinderin that I had like carefully crafted to reflect his personality and history. And that was more of a role playing platform, as most MMOs tend to be for me, than it was an
Yeah.
actual game. But yeah, it is sort of interesting how Paradox has picked up and been like, okay, to provide the kind of ongoing support that we want to keep evolving these games the way we want to, we need some way to keep bringing money in over
To pay
time.
our developers.
Right.
Yeah.
And the way they've chosen to done that, I think, has been a lot more successful than a subscription model would have been,
Yeah.
and has kind of influenced a lot of other stuff as well.
Yeah,
I think the
it's
fact
definitely financially successful. Design-wise, it's quite successful too. So in the future, I think, you know, for predicting the next decade, that model will be going and spreading. Maybe, you know, Civilization might be adopting that, you know, because
Perhaps. I
we
think
do have
the main thing that Paradox is doing as well that makes it, in my opinion, a good DLC model is every DLC is coming alongside a huge patch, which sometimes is bigger than the DLC itself. I think that's quite consumer friendly.
And the fact
Yeah.
that unlike certain other strategy games, when you're playing multiplayer in a Paradox game, the host is the only person that has to have the DLC.
yeah,
Yeah,
I wouldn't play Paradox games if that wasn't the case, because you know, it's hard enough getting my friends to play strategy games. If I had to buy all the DLC too, like I would have no one to play with. Pretty
I
much.
did a multiplayer just, about a couple hours before we started the stream, and someone was like, "Oh, I'll join in. Let me download the game." All they had was the free to play game. They hopped into CK2 and played it, and
Yeah,
they were
yeah.
playing with us just fine because I had all the DLC, and I was hosting.
It's a great model.
Yes.
Endless Legend does the same. You know, if you have all the DLC, everyone who's playing with it too.
I like
It's,
Endless Legend. It's a good game.
There's
Yeah.
a
It's really good.
few other games if you play oh snap, it's a tabletop game and I just totally forgot the name of.
There's a few of them now that have that kind of
Talisman.
periodic expansion.
I was about to say
Tal-
Talisman.
Yeah, Talisman, but that's interesting because it doesn't the host doesn't have to have the DLC. Anyone can have the DLC. So it's like you're literally
Yeah.
playing the board game and you're like, hey, I have the game Talisman and I've got the ice DLC, and someone's like, oh, I've got the fire one. Can I come over and we play together? Sure.
That's a really
Yeah.
good one. I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Yeah. I don't
DJ
either.
Truthsayer pointed that one out to me.
Yeah,
Nice.
he had us playing it before. That was a fun time.
Casey guy was mentioning in chat too that Total War's kind of picked up on this as well. Like some
Yeah.
of the most recent patches to Total War Warhammer have redone things on the same scale as Paradox redoes their entire systems from time to time.
Yeah,
Good that they're
definitely.
learning.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a model that will be used more and more in the future. Definitely.
Yes, as long as it shows itself to be successful, which it is right now, people will start to pick it up.
I think the only real
another,
problem.
another prediction I have, speaking of Total War, we're going to see a lot more Chinese-based games because the runaway success that Three Kingdoms was financially for Total War. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if other companies would be picking up on that and go, ooh, I want a bit of that pie, I think.
Yeah, probably. I think one of the problems, though, with the DLC is when there's a lot of mechanics in the paid part of the DLC. And when I was interviewing Johan, he said he didn't want that for Imperator going forward.
Right.
I'm paraphrasing, but basically the mechanical stuff should all be in the free patch, and then you'd need to work on making the paid part still worth it.
Like
so you don't
flavor and
so you don't end up with a situation like EU4 or CK2 is in, where a lot of the mechanical stuff is to get into the game from the having nothing is really, really expensive. Whereas if you've got a model where it's
I wouldn't
like
even say just
cosmetics and stuff, it's less
mechanical, but quality of life.
Yeah.
The quality of life things, that would definitely
quality
be.
of life things like development was in EU4, which they ended up putting in.
Is that really quality of life? That's mechanical.
That's mechanical, but it's also a bit. Yeah, that's more
quality of life.
mechanical.
I'd say is the macro builder, which was locked to Art of War, I think.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Yeah, whereas development specifically was like, there used to be a way to increase base tax, and they took that out and added development, but only if you had the DLC.
Oh, yeah.
Which is, I think, what irritated everybody about that the most, because it felt like you were kind of losing a feature,
And I think also like Stellaris has nipped that in the bud too.
Oh, yeah, Stellaris has done really well with that. I do know, like, CK2, though, there's organizing prisoners, rally points, asking the Pope for claims, which makes, if you don't have Sons of Abraham, which allows you to do that, playing as a Catholic is tedious.
Retinues?
Very tedious.
I mean, people just buy that retinue DLC for the retinues, right?
Legacy of Rome. Yeah, that's what I did.
Yeah.
You can't see how many people you've killed unless you have Holy Fury.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
You can't sway people to either side if you don't have Holy Fury. Rally points is, of course, behind Jade Dragon. I'm not sure what organizing your prisoners is behind.
Yeah.
Because that got slipped in.
I'm fairly sure that was
it's one of them.
Yeah.
I think that was free alongside the one that came before Holy Fury.
No, it's
Was
paid.
it?
No.
No. You have to pay
Organizing
for
your
something.
prisoners,
I know that.
it's not. I loaded up both base game now and base game back in 2014 just to do a comparison. And that's when I discovered that you can't organize prisoners at all.
Yeah.
Okay.
Monks and mystics
I remember them
Reapers
doing-
do, so somewhere around there.
I remember
I think it was
a dev
Reapers too.
diary
I
about
think it
that,
was.
though.
Yeah.
About how they're just going to work on some quality of life things with like the prisoners thing. I remember that dev diary very vividly.
Huh.
That's paid? Really?
That's paid, yes.
Apparently.
Load up
Pretty
base
sure.
game CK2. It's not in there. I just, as I was saying, I just taught Radio Res, and we were playing with only Old Gods and Way of Life, because Gold Gods is free right now, and Way of Life is only a $5 DLC, which if you're only going to buy one DLC...
Way of Life's the best DLC.
Yeah, and it's
Hands down. Like,
pretty much the cheapest, too.
That you have to pay for because Old God still takes it.
Yeah, it would be between those two. I think Old Gods might be my favorite overall, but Way of Life would probably be second. Yeah.
And Way of Life gives you a lot more replayability and a lot more options.
Yeah.
But, we could not organize prisoners at all.
That's bizarre.
Conclave, sorry, yeah. That's a
Conclave is awesome.
Conclave's good.
I don't like Conclave because I don't like the counselors. I don't like them having. Basically made the strategy. Okay, how do I get rid of all council power? That's it.
that though. I love it.
Council
You
power.
only have 5-6 people to keep happy. If you're playing without the council and you're trying to change a law, you literally have to wait for every single landowner in your nation to vote.
Yeah, I tell you what I like about it. It's a pain in the ass to cancel, but the feel good feeling that you get when you're an absolute ruler and you don't have to deal with the bullshit.
It's a progression, right? Like you have the progression from like tribal to feudal to empire. I feel like the progression from being a limited monarch to an absolute monarch adds another interesting like benchmark for every game of CK2 I play.
Yeah, it's such an endorphin rush when you finally just click on that button. No council control.
I will now
I'd
declare
like
war
to
on
have the council
whoever I
able to
want.
do war declarations, just because then if you have someone who's trying to lead a faction, you're like, oh no, you get to be on my council as an advisor. Boom! There goes that faction with 150% power.
No. I mean, I'd take the rebellion before I could put them on the council, before I empower any council.
Yeah,
it's like,
same.
no, I'll go down fighting before I give you any power.
Oh yeah.
And then my empire falls apart catastrophically, but I'm done fighting.
Yeah, so I think there's actually a good question in here that we could kind of wrap this up with, who was from Boxburger. For the mainline PDX games, where do you want to see them go in 2020 and beyond? I will even add mechanical additions, changes, focuses, etc. My really short answer is just more story generation is kind of what I would love to see. I would love to see maybe Imperator embrace the rise and fall of empires, not just the map painting aspect. Those would probably be my top requests.
It's the same for me, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's the most interesting part of Roman history too, is the decline of the empire.
Yeah.
Barbarian invasions, just that'd be great.
You need more ways for the empires to fall apart.
I think Imperator does falling apart better than any of the other games, though.
Mm-hmm.
Even
Do it
CK2.
better, and we can always hope for more.
Oh, yeah,
we can
I
acknowledge that someone is doing a really good job while still know that they can do better.
Yeah, that's fair. But I'm just acknowledging that at the moment, the fall of empires is done best by Imperator.
Mm-hmm.
That might
more
be,
immersion.
well, I would say to a certain extent, yeah.
Gavelkind doesn't count.
I was going to say, if you include Gavelkind in CK2, but that's a different kind of
that's intentional.
partition. Right.
That's not a fall.
Yeah.
Or there's the Fourth Crusade.
Yes.
That's the one we don't talk about because it didn't happen.
The one that just
No, it
explodes
totally
Byzantium.
happened
It's
in my
great.
Bronze Man game. What was it, last
We've
week?
got-
Oh, God. Oh, God.
Got a Fourth Crusade denier on the show. Man. Yeah.
First he's a globe head, now he's...
Well, we also know Lambert just never plays vanilla games either.
I am currently in the middle of 2 achievement runs in Imperator. So that's vanilla.
It's heresy. What is this? Who are you and what did you do with Lambert?
Hey, well, I guess we can talk about the reasons I don't play achievements in other games another time. But yeah,
Yeah.
2 going on at the moment. They're going pretty well. Should check them out on my channel.
Sweet.
Wait, do you say that you
what-
have 27 achievements now in Imperator?
I do indeed.
Wow. Yeah, and over here I have like 2,200 hours in CK2, and I have one achievement, and it's the one for getting married because I never play Iron Man.
I mean,
5,100 hours in EU4. Zero. Zero.
I
achievements.
never
wow.
play single player. The only time I ever do achievement runs is if I play single player, but with a friend also doing the achievement run. Like that's
Like a challenge
that's the only
against
times
each
I
other.
ever done. Yeah,
yeah.
pretty much. Yeah, that's more like sort of co-op and that sort of thing.
So Lambert, what do you want to see change in the mainline PDX games for the next year, next decade?
I want CK3 to live up their hype. Because,
Yeah.
I mean, CK3 is the biggest thing in 2020. I want to see Imperator come out with a Cicero-level update for Cassander that's going to get people back into playing the game. Because the numbers are still low, and I guess what I'm wanting is less mechanical changes or less game changes and more. I want the company to do well with the games that it's bringing out so that they continue and they're good games. Like that's
Yeah.
I want to play good games and just make good games and I'll be happy, you know? That's what I want.
Rose, what do you want to see?
Again with CK3, I hope, really hope it lives up to the hype. And, I mean, we know there's going to be DLC for CK3. And I just hope
Right.
the DLC follows the Stellaris model rather than the CK2 and EU4 model.
Adding flavor, not mechanics.
Adding flavor, or if it does add mechanics, it adds something like I'm sure we're not getting Nomads or Merchant Republics with CK3, not with the base game. So
Right.
if there's a DLC that added in playable, Merchant Republics, and you can play them, but if you don't have that DLC, the Merchant Republics are still in the game. You just can't play as them. They still act
Yeah,
like
I'd
they
be
would
fair enough.
if you had the DLC. You just you can't even use cheats to access them, kind of like Megacorp's work in Stellaris. But anything they do quality of life is in the base game. It's in the free patch. It allows people to fully experience the game.
Yeah.
What I really want to see in CK3, which hasn't been in CK2, is playing as an unlanded character. That's what I want.
Wanna play
So
as
when-
Yandra.
I honestly, that would be cool, but I honestly can't see it happening.
No,
it's why
it's my
Nomads
wish.
was so
it's my
difficult.
wish. I want to sulk in the French court because my brother took the throne off me, and then gather up some forces and take it back.
I would love that.
I want to play as the Pope.
Yeah. Well, that opens up. Like, if you play as an unlanded, you could open up, that whole
I could see that being a
joining the clergy
whole
and all that.
other game of you are playing
Yeah.
as someone who's a nobody essentially and trying to get power, whether it's
Yeah,
religious
First you become
power or
a
political.
bishop, and then cardinal, and then
Well, look at all the all the Vikings that were just unlanded. I think
Yeah.
what's his name? The guy, what's his,
Ragnar
Rollo
Lothbrok?
didn't have a title, right?
oh, Roland, right.
Basically, if they could combine all of the best parts of Mount and Blade and all of the best parts of Crusader Kings, nobody in the outside world would ever see me again because I would just die in front of my computer playing that game.
Oh, can you imagine? You control your character on the map, walking
Father
around like.
Loris, there is a mod, play as a courtier. Thank you, Alfred.
Yeah.
Is there? I didn't know that.
The link's
I
in
will
the chat
having a
right
look
have a
now.
look. Yeah, give me a. Let's have a look. Oh,
Yeah,
I'll load
seeing
up chat
Mount
now.
Blade and CK2 have babies together would just be the dream.
Yeah.
And then maybe Total War can get involved just to upscale the size of the Mount and Blade battles.
There we go. Just this isn't a big ask. Just somebody
No.
get behind a keyboard and just make this game happen.
Elon
Yeah,
Musk,
yeah,
come
it's-
on, you've got the
it's
money.
really easy
You're
to
a big
thing
nerd. Make it happen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it can't be that hard. Come on.
It'll be-
Change the
It's a
0 to a
success.
1 and then just turn it. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
done.
exactly.
You're playing Mount and Blade if you're just the regular rank and file soldier, but if you get promoted to general, boom, you're playing Total War.
You're just playing normal Mountain Blade. It
So-
crashes you out of a game and boots up to all
You're basically
instead.
talking about a Spore, like the game Spore, but for strategy.
Kind
Yeah,
of.
Sort
yeah.
of, but something
yeah.
that you just said there is quite interesting, Loris. There is a game that I play called Field of Glory Empires,
Yes.
where it is a grand strategy game that we haven't mentioned for a bizarre reason. But if you want to play the battles, not quite to Total War depth, but like pretty decent depth, and it's very engaging and fun and stuff. You literally export the save of your battle into Field of Glory 2, load it up and play the battle, and then export it back into Field of Glory Empires.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Interesting.
it's really good. It's really
It's-
good.
I've never heard of this game, to be
It
honest.
does
I'm,
work pretty well. It feels like Total War with more steps, but it is
Honestly,
a
though,
really interesting idea.
It might be more steps, but the steps are so much shorter. Closing Empires and opening Field of Glory 2 takes less time than it
Yeah.
does to load into a battle in Total
Well,
War.
and Field of Glory 2 is turn based, so it's not like
Yeah.
real time battles like Total
Yeah.
War. But yeah, it's still pretty fun. Yeah, before we get out of here, because we went 90 minutes again. There's
So
just a lot to talk
we should
about.
talk
Talking
about
too
Total War
much.
like
It's
at
all
some
right.
point, because I could talk for ages about Total War 2, and it's sort of in the same realm,
Yeah,
I guess.
I'm sure we have people on commutes and on car trips who are more than happy to listen to us talk for 90 minutes. And to the people in chat who stuck around for the whole time, thank you. Before we get out of here, everyone want to plug where to find your stuff, anything interesting you're doing with your creative work or your channels. Lambert, you want to start us off this week?
Sure. Over on my channel, I've currently got an Imperator multiplayer game that's in its closing stages, an EU4 game that's in its closing stages, another multiplayer, and then 2 Imperator achievement runs. Every Monday and Tuesday I do Dev Diaries, though that will be stopping until January. And
Right.
yeah, I stream over on DLive, so yeah, it's good stuff on my channel. Go check it out.
All right. Loris, what have you been up to? Other than being under a pile of commissions.
Yeah, I've been under a huge amount of private commissions I'm not allowed to talk about, and also I've been working on. So a few weeks ago, I went to the grandest LAN, the EU4 LAN in Motzner Castle. I can tell you what, that was a fantastic event. Get tickets as soon as you can next week because they sell out really quickly and it is brilliant. But I spent some time making a tapestry there, and I've been working on that on and off for the past month, I think, and it is just slowly almost into completion. So hopefully this week, keep your eyes peeled, and there'll be a huge tapestry of all the events that happened on that weekend.
Rose, what have you been up to?
I've been playing a lot of CK2. We've been working our way through the Bronzeman challenges. Also playing, gasp, non-grad strategy. We're playing some Transport Fever 2. Checking out that fun stuff. And we played a Hearts of Iron 4 multiplayer game this last week, which devolved into Canada and Mexico invading the US.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
The dream.
Yeah, I haven't checked out Transport Fever yet, but that seems interesting. I should give that a look.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It's not got multiplayer, I want to play Choo Choo Trains with my friends. That's what I want. Like
true.
Open TTD, man. It's just the best.
Before we
Battle
end,
trains.
I would like to point out to anyone watching us here on on Twitch. We do have links down below. If you click on the different images, you can find the copy of this stream going up, I believe, in the next 24 hours, right, TJ?
Yes.
Yep. You can find
it
iTunes, Spotify,
save at this
YouTube,
time,
and SoundCloud. And I believe we'll have Stitcher as well at some point.
Yeah, we're still in the application process for Stitcher, but we should be on there soon. All the links to all 4 of us and how you can find our channels, as well as all the different places you can subscribe to the show. There's like 5 or 6 of them now. We'll all be in the description if you're watching this on Twitch or YouTube, or it'll be in the show notes if you're listening to it on your favorite podcast app. I think that is going to do it for this week. If you guys have other questions that you want to send in to us, you can also send those to nocbcast@gmail.com or send them to us on Twitter, and we might talk about them on the show. And I think that's about it.
Can I give a shout out to Adaway and Troy too for helping me out with that tapestry? Because
sweet,
they've been a fantastic help. Yeah. It's not all my work.
All right, and we'll see you guys next on January 8th, so in the new year, because we will not be streaming on Christmas Day or New Year's Day.
Right. So
We won't? Damn, I changed my plans then.
no episodes for the next 2 weeks, but we'll be back on January 8th, and we'll see you guys then. Thanks for tuning in.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.